Welcome to the Points News interviews, and today we're joined by Dan Pulju. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great too. Thank you for participating. I'm really glad to hear your thoughts on the recent events in Syria.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Events in Syria have shaken the entire Middle East. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, to say they've shaken the Middle East that's kind of an understatement. They've done a lot more than shake the Middle East. They've reshaped everything and astonished the entire world when the Syrian government fell so easily to HTS. And as, of course, most of the people watching this already know, HTS is Al-Qaeda, and there's evidence that they are supported by both Turkey and by Israel. And personally, there's a lot of speculation. In my opinion, there may have been some kind of agreement between the great powers about what was going to happen in Syria, and they may have agreed that they wanted to finally bring down Bashar al-Assad and bring down his government. But now there is a power vacuum in there, and Israel is taking advantage, taking over the southern provinces, and I believe that other great powers are going to be stepping into this power vacuum and starting to fight over how Syria is eventually governed. So it's really a wide open situation at the moment.
Can the people of Syria expect a better future with the new government?
I don't know. Oh, within my government, or with a
with the new government.
Well, that's up to them to decide, because the fundamental issue here with Syria has always been Syrian sovereignty. And when a country simply becomes targeted by more powerful countries that start to fight over it, what the Syrian people actually want just takes a back seat. And so I can't decide for them what they want and what their future will be. But I don't believe that most of the Syrian people wanted to be taken over by essentially Takfiris who want to impose a Salafist government. And many of the fighters that are involved in the HTS movement and were backed by Turkey are not even Syrian at all. They're from other places like Tajikistan, and they very foolishly allowed Israel to destroy their army, the Syrian Arab army, when it was idle after the Syrian government abandoned it. And so now they have no army. And I pity the Syrian people. I see commentary from them. You know, I don't know many or very few personally, but it is my impression that the Syrian people are not by and large really happy with what's going on. I don't know what they can do about it, but I do know that that it is not generally the business of the United States to determine. Of course, the United States is going to try to. The United States is going to. People in the United States government are going to make it their business, but they shouldn't.
Have you heard that Trump made a statement about Gaza that he wanted to make a ethnic cleansing?
Ethnic cleansing. Yes, he said he wanted to take over Gaza, and I hope, and I think a lot of other people hope, that this is one of his jokes, that he's kind of trolling the world and just trying to create a sensation. Because number one, that would be a terrible thing to do, and it would actually it would reignite the war in Gaza. The people of Gaza would never accept that. And just for the record, the people of Gaza are not Hamas. There's 2 million people there, and they're not going to just give up their land and be forced to move. In the best case scenario is that Trump is just playing around with the media and provoking people, and that he has actually no intention of doing that. And maybe I would hope that he was using that as just kind of a frivolous pro-Israel position to take that was just so crazy and out there that he can just abandon it later on. But for the moment, it makes him look that he is makes him look like he is staunchly pro-Israeli, and kind of insulates him from criticism coming from that angle.
Yeah, probably those are just words without actions. All right, moving back to Syria. Could the coup in Syria mark the beginning of a larger conflict in the Middle East?
Yes, of course it could. It is kind of a phase in just the general geopolitical conflict between Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. Because of the fall of the Syrian government, Lebanon is now cut off from military supply coming from Iraq and Iran through Syria. That was I believe, one of the major goals of overthrowing the Syrian government, was to break those supply lines, those overland supply lines, which go on the highway through Syria. They were briefly broken during the early years of the Syrian war, and then the United States occupied the Northeast, east of the Euphrates River, which also cut off contact with Iraq. And then a new border crossing was created at Al-Bukamal on the Syrian border between Syria and Iraq. And on the Iraqi side is the town of Al-Qaeda, and the Iraqi militia, Kataib Hezbollah, are active there. And viewers may recall a few years ago there was a United States airstrike on Kataib Hezbollah, and that escalated into the series of events that included the assassination of General Qassem Suleimani, and then the Iranian retaliation on the American air base, which was a lot more severe and effective than the United States media allowed people to understand. They had to airlift several dozen U.S. personnel to Germany for treatment for traumatic brain injury, because the Iranian missiles are modern, and they're powerful, and they're high precision. And so even in bunkers, the concussion from the explosions, well, they caused concussions to the U.S. personnel. May have lost track of the original question, but yes, it could lead to a much wider war, and of course, I hope it doesn't. And it could make the conflicts of the past 10 years or so in the Middle East look like games if regular militaries get involved. Even the Islamic State, Daesh, was not quite a modern military, in the sense of, if modern militaries start fighting there, then it could be a long and bloody conflict.
And could the events in Syria lead to an increase in terrorist activity?
They already have. To put it bluntly, Syria has been taken over by terrorists now. Abu Muhammad al-Julani is Al-Qaeda, and he was the second in command of Islamic State. And it seems that all these countries that are normalizing relations with this are just they're throwing that down a memory hole. Like, oh, they're not even going to bother remembering that who al-Julani is. They rename him Ahmed al-Sharaa now. But so it's as if Muhammad al-Julani and Islamic State and Al-Qaeda never even existed. But they're there, and it's real. And of course, they are currently, I can't confirm the reports, but they are currently conducting an ethnic cleansing of their own in Syria, in particular, ethnic cleansing of Shia and Alawites in the West. And I would call that terrorism. And of course, I would also call the United States State Department has a term, state-sponsored terrorism, for other countries they don't like, but the United States, of course, has been a state sponsor of terrorism itself for decades, and played a major role in promoting the rise of Al-Qaeda, the continuance of Al-Qaeda throughout the Iraq War. and their transplantation into Syria, and including in the rise of Islamic State. And there are strong allegations, including the made by people, including the Syrian government, the government of Bashar al-Assad, that the United States preserved Islamic State after its defeat in the Northeast and recruited new militants from the prison camps to start a new insurgency west of the river in the Central Desert. And of course, they maintained a military base at a place called Al-Tanf near the Jordanian border in southern Syria, and they used that to provide support to these militants in the Central Desert. And of course, most of the American people don't know that, but this is generally common knowledge elsewhere and amongst the legitimately anti-war segment of the U.S. populace. So yes, yes, the question is, will there be terrorists? Of course there will be. I see it's been going on constantly, and I see no sign of it ending anytime soon.
Let's take a look at this topic from the other angle. As we know, Syrian society has seen Christians, Muslims, and other religious groups coexist. The question is, will the new government be able to maintain this balance in the spiritual sphere?
No, they won't. They're Salafists. They're Islamist supremacists, and they will ethnically cleanse anyone who is not aligned with them on a sectarian basis. More generally, the question, as phrased, asks whether they're the new government, and in my opinion, to be legitimately a government, you have to actually be in control of a country, number one, and number two, you have to be able to defend the country. I don't believe that HTS is in control of Syria. I believe that HTS is a proxy of its foreign sponsors and is working on their behalf. And that in particular is why it offers absolutely no opposition to Israel. Israel can just march right into the southern provinces, into Dara and Sueda, and just take them over. And HTS they issue maybe a statement complaining about it, but they don't do anything about it other than that. Likewise, I think that I don't want to insult the Turkish state here, but it's obvious that they have been protected by Turkey. And of course, Turkish-backed militants, the Syrian National Army, is currently active in the north, fighting against the United States proxies, and which of course still are in control. The Syrian Democratic Forces are still in control of the northeast. The SDF is more likely to be tolerant of ethnic diversity and religious diversity simply because the Northeast, although people call the SDF the Kurds, it's not a homogenous Kurdish area. They're not all Kurds. There's Assyrians. There's a lot of ethnicities and religions in Syria, but the SDF is the main point here is that no one is really in control of the entire country. Syria is being divided up and conquered and fought over by these factions in factional struggles. And HTS is not a strong faction. They allowed the Syrian Arab army to be destroyed, so they don't have a conventional army that is able to resist the control of foreign forces that are stronger than them. And I think they always knew that, and that they understand that they are not meant to actually be in control of the entire country, except as a proxy, working for foreign interests. The SDF also, of course, is working for the United States, and so it will never be fully in control of the Northeast either. That's the real danger of the situation. So the question again, the new government, well, there isn't a new government. There are states that instantly recognized the HTS takeover and said, okay, yes, well, that's because that's what they wanted. And now, of course, they see their puppet in control of the country, well, yes, of course, they're all for that and they'll recognize it, but that doesn't mean that it is de facto a functioning state. It's closer to being a failed state like we've seen in Libya and Somalia.
What lies ahead for Syria in the coming years, in your view? Just maybe you have any thoughts.
Well, I think I just said it. I think the most likely scenario, unless something really miraculous happens, is that it will remain divided, like Libya, which the war in Libya started. It's been 14 years now since the war in Libya started, and Gaddafi was overthrown. And it's still a divided country. People are still fighting over it. I've stopped following it. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but there's a UN recognized government, and there's in the West, and then in the East, there's an area controlled by the Libyan National Army. And I'm not Libyan, so it's not up to me what ultimately happens there, but I can easily see how the current situation happened, and that was from the meddling, the foreign meddling, from, in particular, the Western powers that, for whatever reason, decided that it was their business to just destroy Libya and turn it into a failed state. That is very likely going to be Syria's fate unless this problem is fixed, is addressed directly. And the problem is, of course, the foreign meddling in Syria. I don't know that the Syrian people have got the strength, and they certainly don't have the armed forces remaining to be able to resist the constant battling over their resources and their fate of their country by people that are not Syrians. As an American, what I can do is try to correct my own country's behavior. Now, I've been trying to do that. It's very difficult, though, because they are very powerful and they're extremely wealthy.
And my final question to considerate about is, do you think there is a universal solution that could help end military conflicts around the world?
I think the best solution to the current conflicts is a form of parity. Most of the conflicts that occur in the modern world are attacks of impunity. This is why the West has been so involved. The United States military, because it has spent, as we know, it spends more than the rest of the world combined on its military, and became the dominant hegemon after the end of the Cold War. And so that put it in a situation where it had impunity, and no one was able to resist it. And it's really easy to start a war when your opponent can't fight back, and they become less common when both sides realize that the risk to themselves is too high to start a war. And it's possible that the United States warmongering is finally ending because we finally have, as a people, woken up to the negative consequences, in many cases disastrous, of what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those invasions were easy, but the occupations were long and pointless and costly. We wasted a whole ton of money, and our own government became authoritarian. We ended up with a constant wartime government, and we decided, well, that sucks. We did not actually want to do that. We wouldn't have had to go through that if those other countries had been stronger. The Cold War might have gotten a lot worse if the United States had remained the only nuclear power. It might have gone around simply using nuclear weapons, as it did in Japan. Now we have in the Middle East, Israel is an unopposed nuclear power and is kind of freaking out constantly about the potential of Iran becoming a nuclear power. But what if Iran did become nuclear? Would Israel then have the impunity to be invading Syria, to be demolishing and committing a genocide in Gaza, which you haven't mentioned, but is something we must never forget, and attacking Lebanon, assassinating public officials in Lebanon? And of course, Israel has not admitted having nuclear weapons, but it's widely understood that it does. A country that is that strong can act with impunity, and when it can, it will. And so when it is opposed by people that are competent to defend themselves, then you end up with this rogue behavior will diminish, and that will produce stability. That's my hope.
Thank you for sharing your opinion.
Thank you for asking.
It was nice speaking to you. Have a good one.
You too.